A year ago this week, I interviewed an exiled Egyptian comedian about the aftermath of October the 7th. It was a time of intense anger and passion. Bاسم Yusuf's jarring and satirical take became globally iconic. A month later, we met again, face-to-face, in his adopted home city of Los Angeles. And Bاسم has since become an unwitting global spokesman for the Palestinian cause and against the way it's been reported by Western media. Well, more than a year in, the war rages on. There's a lot to catch up on. For the first time ever in the Uncensored studio here in London, Bاسم Yusuf rejoins me. Bاسm, great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Finally in London, yes. My home city, finally. Extraordinary that it's been a year. When you think back to that first interview that we did, that 23 million people watched around the world, and I still get asked about it all the time. Just take me back to how you were feeling then. It was so... In the immediate aftermath of October the 7th, Israel's response was coming very hard at the time. What was in your mind at the time when you did that interview and the way you conducted it?
I was very scared. I was advised by my managers and agents not to do the interview because I could lose my career. And I just took it because, and actually, as a matter of fact, your producers asked me a couple of times and I said no. Because,
really?
And then I said, like, I had to do it.
I want to play, just for those who haven't seen it, there aren't many, but let's take a look at some of that first interview.
Those Palestinians, they're very dramatic. Israel killing us. But they never die. I mean, they always come back. You know, they're very difficult to kill, very difficult people to kill. I know because I'm married to one. I tried many times, couldn't kill her.
I mean, there's a dark humor there, and I understand why, because...
No, it's not dark humor. I try to get to her every time, but she uses our kids as human shields. I can never take her out. I really applaud Israel for doing one thing that no military force in the world does. Because I heard Ben Shapiro and I heard Ron DeSantis, and they said, Israel is the only military force in the world that warns civilians before bombing them. I mean, how fucking cute. That is so nice of them. Because with this logic, if Russian troops started warning Ukrainians before bombing their houses, we're cool with Putin, right? I mean, okay, Habibi, you have warned them, go invade, it's fine, you have done your job.
It was a brilliantly devastating technique you used in that interview, which took me a while to work out what you were doing and why you were doing it. It was very powerful, resonated with many people very closely. Where do you think we are with this war now? And in fact, not just the war, obviously, in Gaza, but the wider war that's raging now in Lebanon, the threats against Iran and so on, the whole thing.
I mean, Israel is defending itself, right? I mean, that's what the Western media is telling us.
They would say they are.
Yeah. And I want to buy into it. I'm trying to convince my
Can
friends.
you buy into any of their logic, that they believe they are defending themselves?
Okay.
Do you believe them, that they believe that?
Let's put that on the test. So if Israel is defending itself, it's defending itself against an imminent danger, like an existential threat. I don't understand if, for example, Macron would announce that he will impose an embargo in Israel's arms, and then Israel goes and bombs the French oil facilities in Lebanon. How is that defending themselves? There's like a group of American doctors who were in Gaza and came back, and they reported seeing tens of children with sniper shots in their heads and necks. How is that defending themselves? Just a couple of days ago, we saw a little kid being shot by a drone. His family came to help him, and then they were all killed. How is that defending itself? I mean, I hear it, but I just don't see it.
But do you believe that fundamentally Israel believes it is acting in self-defense?
Israel can believe whatever they want. I'll tell you a story that actually can tell you exactly how Israel... I'm from Egypt, you understand this? You don't know this, right?
Yeah.
April 1970, there was an attack of an Egyptian school in the middle of Delta, 100 kilometers from where my parents were born. It's called Bahr al-Bahr. On that day, Israel bombed a school, killing 30 students. Now, what was so interesting, going back in history, this was the headline of the New York Times of the day, and it says 30 pupils in Egypt said to die in raid. Said to die, the passive voice. Which raid? Who did the raid? We don't know. And then you read it. This is Moshe Dayan. He was the defense minister of Israel at the time. He said, the target had been a military structure that had been photographed from air both before and after the raid. What could have happened here was irresponsibility of high orders from the Egyptians that they set aside a floor or some room for civilian purposes such as a school. Now, do you believe that? You don't, right? It's ridiculous. And the fact is that the New York Times then, same as the New York Times there, covering for it. But there was one thing that caught my attention. They said no mention was made of the use of napalm in the attack. I said, why would we have such a disclaimer? It's because 3 months ago, Israel bombed a civilian metal plant, killing 70 workers with napalm. So this, when I hear Israel defend itself, when I hear the IDF, they're liars. And I'm sorry to say, but they are.
Do you categorize what Hamas has been doing, particularly on October the 7th, what Hezbollah did within hours of October the 7th and carried on for the next year, what the Houthis have done, a lot of it orchestrated by, doubtless, the Iranian regime. Do you categorize that as resistance, as freedom fighting? Or are there elements of all those groups who are genuinely terrorists in their thinking?
Well, you know, someone's hitting my house, so yes, of course they're terrorists.
Do you believe that?
Well, at the advice of my lawyer, I would say
Well,
that they're terrorists.
I don't think you'd be banned from going back to America.
You
if you
think?
said they were terrorists.
You know what happened to Scott Ritter? He was the former UN inspector of nuclear weapon in Iraq.
He's a convicted paedophile.
Yeah, but like when he was raided a few months ago, it was because he was talking against Israel. Asa Winstanley, he was a British journalist in London, and his house was raided just last week because he talked about Israel. And this is actually, Pierce, what I like about you is that you are a fierce warrior against cancel culture, right?
Yeah.
If you cancel people for their opinion, we're not living in a free world anymore, right?
I totally agree.
So, for example, you have Robert Saleh, who was the coach of the NFL Jets. He wore like a small Lebanese flag, and he was canceled. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I came to America, and I was so happy that I can speak about anyone I want, and then suddenly it's like, oh, you can do whatever you want, unless if it's like
it is. I mean, it's tangible to me when I go to America, far more than it is in the UK, for example. The support for Israel is pretty rock solid in terms of their political class, in terms of much of the media, if not all of the media. It's more tangible in America than it is in most other countries.
Yeah.
Including here.
Yeah.
A lot more criticism of Israel here than there is in America.
Yeah, and yet you have Israel having a crazy control on the political apparatus, whether in America or in here. I mean, 13 out of 25 of the labor cabinet here are funded by Israeli lobbies. 126 out of 355 MPs are funded by Israel. I mean, out of those 13 members of cabinet is the prime minister himself, his counselor, his deputy, the home secretary, the foreign secretary, and the secretary of the treasury, who oversees the arms shipments to Israel. So I don't understand why. I mean, I think we should talk about that more about anything, because that is actually what gives Israel the cover for what they're doing.
My take on Israel's government is that Netanyahu, to get back into power, aligned himself with some very hard right-wing people who've spoken in a very genocidal language about what they really want to do with Gaza and Palestinian people, and that he should go and they should go, and there should be new leadership in Israel, but that there should also be no place in power or government going forward for a group like Hamas after what they did on October the 7th. Would you agree with me?
Well, I'm not a Palestinian, so I cannot really...
What's your view?
Well, what's my view? Oh, yeah, I understand the view of... Well, there's two things about it. First of all, when you say that Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben Gvir should go, it's as if as the rest of the Israeli political scene is peaceful. As a matter of fact, more than 90% of Israelis in a poll said that they should do more in Gaza. Over 70% of Israelis said that they should actually stop the aid, the humanitarian aid in Gaza. But let's talk about how, yeah, I understand the thing. Like, if you gave them a state, it would be rewarding terrorists, right? And we understand, like, you know, I mean, I have to be fair. I know that a lot of Arabs will hate me for saying this, but like, yeah, terrorism has been actually going in the Middle East for a very long time. I mean, do you remember the bombing of the King David Hotel? 92 British soldiers were killed. The bombing of the Cairo Haifa train, over 200 soldiers, British soldiers killed. The assassination of Volker Bernadotte or Lord Moyen, all done by Israeli Zionist militias. They were the terrorists, and they were rewarded of having their own state. So I don't understand the double standard. As a matter of fact, one of the people who were in these terrorist attacks was Isaac Shamir, and he was on a terrorist list, English terrorist list, and he couldn't come to London until he became a prime minister. But to be fair, the Israeli government at the time, 1949, have actually declared the Stern gang as a terrorist group, and they arrested two of them. And they gave them very, 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 very severe sentences, 8 and 5 years, and then they were released after a month.
Do you see any blame on your side for any of this going back to 1948?
Yeah.
Genuinely, I mean, I'm not after a satirical response. I mean, genuinely, when you look back at the history of this conflict, I mean, one of the most powerful pieces I've read actually about all this, or one that I just thought was very interesting, was a Jewish journalist called Jonathan Friedland at The Guardian. And he wrote a column where he said he could make a very powerful argument, both for Israel and for the Palestinians, in which he could present a case that they were the more overriding victim of this whole conflict.
I'm aware of Jonathan Freeland.
What's your view of him?
Well, everybody knows he's a liberal Zionist. He's one of the most outspoken people in defending Israel.
But he wasn't. But my point was, he said that he could construct a case for Palestinians to have a genuine right to feel aggrieved.
You know what else?
Can you do the same the other way?
You know what else he said? He said, Israel has a very difficult choice of if they continue doing it in Gaza or not doing it in Gaza. All we can do is just acknowledge it and see it. And this is very privileged because he can do it because he's on the stronger side. And this is the thing. It's like, oh, we can acknowledge it, we see it, it's so bad, we're killing civilians, but what we can do? And then we raise our hands at the end. And it's like, it's too bad, it's inevitable. War is so bad, it's bad. But to your point, yeah, I think the Palestinians had done a grave mistake for not accepting the settlement that they were given by the UN partition. I mean, they were given 47% of their land. And I mean, let's go back. The Balfour Declaration was 1917. At the time, there was 60,000 Jewish people living in a 700,000 population, which makes them 8%. That number jumped from 8% to 30% after the Second World War and the Holocaust. Now, imagine yourself being a Palestinian, you're having all of these refugees coming to you, and then they're forming gangs and stealing your land and killing you. And then the UN said, like, I know what we can do. I'm going to give the people who just arrived 30 years ago 53 of the land, and I'm going to give the people who are already there, who form 70%, 47%.
But there are also, so I would say to you, there are also hundreds of thousands of Jewish people who were displaced from their homes in Arab countries. So was that wrong?
Well, I advise that you read Avi Shloim, who is a Jewish Iraqi, and he also, I think he's also British. That's not the timeline. The timeline was...
It is true, though.
Yeah, but that's not the timeline. The timeline is important. The timeline was the Zionist gangs, they were killed, they raped, they stole land, and then they basically evicted the people out of their land. And overnight, 750,000 Palestinians was displaced. Overnight. Over the few years, of course, now Israel is now the enemy. And there was a lot of rise of nationalism and yes, in some countries, that happened. But like,
but was that wrong? Is my point.
Of course, but like, it is not the whole thing.
What I'm trying to do, and I'm not trying to trap you or trick you.
No.
I'm just trying to get you to concede that in a period since 1948, there have been things on both sides. I'm not trying to equivocate either. I'm just trying to get you to. I understand completely everything you've said and are going to say about Israel, and you're very implacable about that, and you have every right to be so. I get that. But can you find criticism of your own side in this argument going back to 48, proper criticism, where if things had been done differently, perhaps we wouldn't be where we are?
Okay, so if you are British and you had 1 million Ukrainians arriving to your home, and then over 30 years, that number increased to 30% of the population, and then the UN gave you less than half of your country. Wouldn't you fight? Wouldn't you resist? But now it's our fault. There's a lot of mistakes. I mean, the Middle East has been plagued by a lot. But having mistakes we should not be penalized by having our land taken away from us just because the other side is stronger, right? Because what are you telling your kids? If you're strong and you have enough arms and weapons, you can take whatever land you want. That's not why the UN was formed. That's not why the Security Council was formed.
When you heard that Sinwar, the Hamas leader, had been killed, what were your feelings about that?
Well, when I heard he was killed, of course, this is something that was actually, I said, like, oh, wow, that's actually, he survived all of that. But I think it was a huge mistake by the Israelis to release the footage, because now he's an icon, right?
Is he?
Well, I mean, again, someone's terrorist is someone else's hero, right?
Right, but all he did was lob a piece of wood at them. That was
it. I mean, he was also he was lost an arm and he was there, and it took them 3 tanks to bring down the house. I mean, hey, you can respect your enemy.
But when you saw the footage, for example, of Sinwar in one of the tunnels he'd helped create, spending the billions that have been given to Hamas.
Billions?
Well, they were given billions of dollars. And I would say Netanyahu was quite happy to do that because he wanted to create a split between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. So I'm not.
So why are we blaming Hamas? Why are you not blaming Hamas?
No, I'm just saying that Hamas had an option of how to spend that money.
Yeah,
they were the government in power, and they chose predominantly to spend it on a tunnel system and arming themselves. When you see Sinwar walking through that tunnel safely with his wife and his kids and so on, and there's a load of money next to him.
A load of money?
There was a huge pile of cash next to where he was supposedly sleeping. When you see that, do you not think that he betrayed his own people?
No.
That they weren't able to use these tunnels, the Palestinians? Well, he knew when he activated October the 7th and ordered it, what the reaction was likely to be. He was sentencing to death immediately thousands of his own people, none of whom were allowed, apart from the Hamas elements, to use the tunnel system. I mean, is that not a sickening betrayal of his people?
Well, let's talk about the billions of dollars who were what was actually used. I remember a report by Ben Shapiro, and he brought videos of Hamas digging up tubes, water pipes, and then and they're using them as weapons. And they said these are the money that was given to them by the EU, and they squandered it. They took the money. But the thing is, what Ben Shapiro didn't say that he stole that report from Al Jazeera. He removed the narration, and what the narration was said that this was actually pipes that was installed by the Israelis in order to steal the money from Gaza.
Okay, but
so there's a lot of lying in the thing.
I don't dispute this line, but what you can't dispute, Bاسm, is that clearly since 2005, Hamas has spent a fortune of money they could have spent differently with their people. They spent it on this sophisticated and extensive tunnel system.
The tunnel system that is bigger than the New York subway system?
It would appear so.
450 miles?
I don't know. Do you know how big it is?
450. I mean, nobody. I think if there's 450 miles underneath the tunnel, we have seen droves and droves of tunnels. What we have seen is small rooms, very, very.
So you don't believe that there is?
No, I don't. No, I don't believe. Of course, there are tunnels, but I don't believe that they are 450 miles because that's ridiculous. If you want to understand, you tell me that Hamas, under siege, were able to build a subway system bigger than New York in less than 15 years? I don't think.
Did they serve their people, though, with how they spent their money?
I'm not sure. I don't know. The thing is, there's a lot of propaganda. I don't know how much they spend on themselves. I don't know how much they spend on the tunnels. I don't know how much they spend on the people. But the thing is, these are all side talks. The main talk is the daily killing that's happening all through it. They could be bad people. They could be horrible people. They could be corrupt people.
Could be or are?
They are. Okay? They are horrible. They are vampires. They are zombies.
But do you believe that? Or are you just saying that for performative reasons?
No, I'm saying that because, again, I don't want to go and find the FBI at my door.
But I'd rather you were honest. I mean, surely we're at the stage of this war now, a year on, where I can find a lot to criticise with Netanyahu and his government, and I can find a lot to criticise with Hamas, with Hezbollah, with Iran. I can find a lot to criticise all over the place. I think as part of the problem is it's just an extraordinary mess with a lot of people who've been behaving badly. Yes. In my opinion, betraying their people and making it almost impossible to come together for peace.
So basically, we punish the Palestinians for being betrayed by Hamas, and we punish the Palestinians again by letting them get slaughtered
Well,
every day.
you punish the Palestinians in the sense that you're exacting retaliation for a heinous terror attack on your people. That's what the Israelis say.
Fine. Okay.
Should they not have responded?
Who, Israel?
Yeah. On October the 8th, should their response have been to do nothing?
Oh, it's the question of like, what would I have done, right? Which is like one of the craziest questions ever. It's like, what would I have done? What would I have done if I magically got teleported into the body of a serial
What should they
killer?
have done?
Well, again, this is asking after the fact, Piers.
But what do you think now, looking back? What would have been a better course of action? Their argument, Israel, is they went after Hamas. They've just taken out the leader of Hamas, who was literally amongst people in Rafah, which was a refugee camp area. That's where he was hiding, and they killed him there. They say that justifies them going into Rafah. It's an arguable point, obviously, but you can't deny that Sinwar was hiding there. They also say that all of what they've been doing is a response to what happened to their people, and that they have to stop the group that did that from doing it again, which they're wedded to doing.
So what is their proportionate response?
Well, that's been the question I've asked for a year.
Yeah, but like, you know,
I don't know the answer.
That question kind of lost its validity after 1 month of the war.
Well, I've seen you say, for example, you've been critical of me saying, I only do what I do because I'm after clicks, I'm after...
I never said that about you.
You did.
No.
No, you did.
When?
We found it.
Where?
Let me find that clip. Where is it?
Where is it? Oh,
Not a clip, no, it's an interview. Hang on. Where is it?
Oh, okay.
Oh, here we go, yeah. So you said this.
Yeah.
You said at the Arab Media Forum in June, I don't know why people care that Piers Morgan changes his opinion.
Yes.
He's a man who seeks trends and increasing viewership. It's true.
Yes.
As he hosts people and sits with them to raise viewership numbers. Yes. His opinion isn't important at all because he only cares about what is trending and what people will talk about. So it doesn't matter that he changed his opinion. Piers is a man who has a media platform on which we appear to convey our ideas to his viewers, nothing more.
And there's nothing wrong with that. By the way, that's your job, actually, to get clicks and views. Because the question I was asked is, what do you think of
But the
Piers?
implication of
Does he change your mind? And I said, like, I don't care about him changing
I understand
his mind,
that.
because that's your job.
But the implication of what you were saying was that that's all I care about. And that I don't actually care about what I genuinely care about, which is trying to work out what the world should think about this. What is the correct proportionate response from either side to any of the things that have happened? And I think it is morally complex. You find it morally more straightforward. I find it complicated. And I've wrestled with how I should think about this. I've gone on a bit of a journey. Now, it doesn't mean that, for example, I would find common ground with you about the way the Palestinian people have been treated for many decades. I do think it's been a form of occupation.
Form of?
Yeah.
Not an occupation. Not a full-blown occupation.
As I said to Israelis when they come on, I don't know how you can argue that it's an occupation. I know you moved out in 2005, but the reality is once this war started...
They didn't move out.
Well, once they formally moved out...
You basically went out of the room and you locked the room and you basically controlled the perimeter of the room.
I was about to say, after October the 8th, when they began to turn off the water supply, the food supply, the power and so on, it was quite clear they still wield power.
But that was going on since 2006.
No, I understand.
That never stopped.
So I'm agreeing with it.
You know what
I'm agreeing with
Okay,
you.
okay.
What I'm saying is, clearly that is a form of occupation. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the power
It is an
to do it.
occupation, not a form.
Yeah. I mean, look.
It's like saying it's a form of terrorism.
Okay, I take that point.
Yeah.
Let's call it an occupation. And it has to end. And in my view, I've always hoped and believed there should be a two-state solution. Do you believe that is